Hi there, thanks for joining us for another episode of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. We've got some great stories for you today and a really good one for our last one, a bit of a light-hearted one. What's your favourite TV ad? And I think you're also going to like our guest today, Linda Duberley. Yeah, hi folks. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. Whoever you are, wherever you are, or however you are watching us. And talking of however you are watching us, a great way to find us is go to YouTube and into the search box, type Unprecedented TV, and then you can find us there. And if you can give us a cheeky subscribe, so much the better. That's a really great way to keep in touch with us. So the show, we go out and we buy the papers so that you don't have to. And we look behind the front page. We just don't look at the front pages like you get on the evening news. We look at some of the more nuanced stories you may not have heard of, or you may only be coming across for the first time. And then we have a guest, and I'll be introducing Linda Duberley, our guest, who's back on the show again, a friend of the show. Great to have her back. Okay, folks, so a little monologue from me first, very quickly. Where are we with Labour's EU reset? I'm sure you will remember in 2016, we voted in record numbers, 17.5 million of us, to leave the European Union. We voted to take back control, didn't we? Well, Labour's slogan seems to be give up control. They are taking us back in all but name. They want to give us a Brino, a Brexit in name only. And this is a problem. The US ambassador in the UK has already spoken about this being a problem for the trade deal. People are going to do a trade deal with us. We've got a trade deal with India, for example, and Australia and others, because we have the freedom to do that since we left the European Union. We can negotiate our own trade deals and not have to rely on Brussels to do them for us. And here we have a very good story. UK following EU rules is a problem, says US ambassador to the UK. And countries that we have a trade deal with and future ones will realize that we are not in control of what we have agreed. So there's a load of areas where they're going to take us back in and we will have no say. I mean, at least when we were in, we had a seat at the table, although so did 27 other countries, and they could also push for what they wanted. Okay, so that's an issue. That is a problem, and we will see how that pans out in the days and months to come. We've got local elections on May the 7th, of course. Will Starmer survive May the 7th? We shall have to wait and see. But I worry that whoever is Labour Prime Minister will, be even worse than him. Rachel Reeves will probably have to go as well. And here we have, yes, Angela Rayner is our Angela, tax-dodging Angela Rayner, going to be our next Prime Minister. Oh, my goodness. And whoever it is, they will want to take us more back into the orbit of Brussels. Okay, that's my little bit for this episode. We'll now look at some of the stories with our guest, Linda Duberley, a friend of the show. And Linda, great to have you back on again. Welcome.
Great to be back, Tim. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. What have you been up to lately, and where can people find you? You're on X, for example, aren't you?
I am. I also do some commentary on GB News and Talk TV, the Mike Graham Show. Apart from that, I do communications advice, really, at a strategic level. So people can find me on X, they can find me on Facebook, they can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me almost anywhere, in fact.
Ah, are you at Linda Duberley?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. So yeah, I'm at Tim Scott UK. Okay. Both on X. Very good. And lovely to have you back, Linda. Thank you for bearing with us. Okay. Let's have a look at some of these stories that have been in the newspapers recently. And this first one is from the Times. Now, I think this is a story that's going to run and run. And I first heard about it. It hasn't had much publicity here in the UK, but I think this is a story that is going to run and run. I first heard about it on the Bill Maher show, Maher. He's one of the few American shows I watch. You can get him on Sky Comedy if you've got a subscription to it. And these court cases are to do with platforms making it more addictive for children to watch. Meta verdict, a glimpse of happiness, the story tells us. And are we going to start to find more of this kind of thing over here? A British father suing Snapchat over the death of his daughter has called this week's American legal ruling against Meta and YouTube the first glimpse of happiness since the tragedy. Mia Janin, 14, took her own life in 2021 after she was bullied online. On Wednesday, a jury in Los Angeles found that the companies were liable for the harm caused to another young woman, 20-year-old Rayleigh, who has been a heavy user of their platforms since she was a young child, and she was awarded $6 million in damages. Now, what Bill Maher who broadcasts from California, where these trials were taking place, this is a sort of a bellwether trial. And what he was talking about was that TikTok and Snapchat pre-settled in these cases. Linda, what do you think? I think this could be huge.
Oh, I think it will be. And I think it did dominate the headlines earlier in the week on the main news bulletins. I certainly saw the verdict come through myself. But you are absolutely correct to say that this story has legs because everybody's watching. Because as you say, it is a kind of bellwether. Now, and it could come, or even in this country where we don't have class actions exactly, we can launch lawsuits, which are very, very problematic for these companies. Now, I think the whole issue is not just this verdict, but the whole issue about young children online is a very big issue which will not go away. We've heard all the headlines this morning about what the government wants to try and do about controlling what very young children see on their devices. And it is a very, very problematic area for children. But, you know, part of me says, and I did have a boy that had considerable problems, that we needed a lot of professional help. Thankfully, due to his own fantastic efforts, he came through what was a very challenging period with online gaming, who is now a tremendous individual and, you know, a success by anyone's yardstick.
Yeah, good stuff.
But as a parent, it is a very, very difficult situation. Although I think that times were, what people say now, well, times aren't as tough as they were 25 years ago. There were different problems 25 years ago. Yeah. Now we have to raise children in this environment, and it is very difficult. On the radio this morning, I'm listening to parents who want to know how to control the child who has a device under the age of 5. Now, in my opinion, the child shouldn't have a device under the age of 5. It's utterly ridiculous. The number of times I've been to restaurants where parents have just got a family table in the corner and they've just given the child an iPad and they'll play quietly while the parents eat their meal. It's completely extraordinary. I know headmistresses and headmasters that I've personally spoken to that say by the time the child gets to school, they can't actually read a book properly. Even a simple little book that a 5-year-old should be able to read is not being read properly. And this morning I heard more about when the child sometimes attempts to swipe the pages of the book.
Swipe the book, yes.
Yeah, because they don't see it.
I've seen families sitting there, you know, mum, dad, 2 kids, they're all on their phone.
It's because it's easier. Now,
they've gone out for Sunday lunch and they're all sitting there on their phone.
It's terrible. Now, there are so many different components to this story that you have to pay attention to. And I've got nothing but sympathy for the family of this young girl who took her own life. Nothing but sympathy. Terrible. Bullying is terrible in any form. And I think that when I can remember being bullied at my primary school. I've seen other children bullied at their secondary school. But this is much, much worse, because when you get home, there's any number of bullies and there's no end to it. It's always there, 24/7.
Yeah, the bullying follows you from the school.
Follows you home.
Yeah.
Whereas my parents, you shut the door and that was over. You're in a safe haven. You're actually never in a safe haven. So I believe that this father did do the right thing in backing this court case in America. I actually think the court came up with the right decision, because even though I don't believe it will ultimately lead to the kind of thing that some families want, at least it's raised a red flag and said, look, this is a really big problem.
Yeah. No, thank you, Linda. And you're a very experienced broadcaster. You comment on this with some authority, and I think very, very interesting that a couple of, as Bill Mayer had pointed out back in January, a couple of platforms had pre-settled. Maybe they saw what was coming. But further comment here in the Times, it says strong grounds for appeal. Meta and YouTube, Meta, of course, operating Facebook and Instagram, and YouTube have strong grounds for an appeal against the verdict that they are liable for harm caused to a young woman who became addicted to their platforms, according to legal experts. Well, look,
I do think they have strong grounds for an appeal.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the morality of it, but actually I think the judge, or at least one of the lawyers concerned in this case, said that there were more reasons for this girl to be for her mental well-being to have suffered. There was not only one reason. It wasn't only about being online. So I assume that any appeal against this will follow that path. And so that's one reason why they'll appeal. And I don't think that those big tech platforms could afford to let this verdict stand, because it therefore will be a precedent in other cases. So in a sense, they have to appeal.
They have to appeal. You're right,
yeah,
Linda.
And that means the story, as you rightly say, has legs. But it goes way beyond that, because it's not just about these court cases. It is about harm that's being done to our children, whether you're involved in a legal case or not. You should not be allowing your child to be raised by the internet. That is a very bad thing to happen. I have personal experience of what can go on here. And I've interviewed some of the leading experts, both in this country, in Europe, and in America, in the US, about what's happening here. There's no question that these games and these online platforms are addictive. They don't call it doom scrolling for nothing.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Linda. These platforms, of course, have very deep pockets, and they will be able to lawyer up and get the A team in. There's a couple of themes you've quite rightly picked up on, which we'll come back to in a story or two. But no, thank you for your comments on that, Linda. Very, very, very worrying, this whole thing. Okay, so I hope you share our concerns there, those of you that are watching. Okay, let's move on to our next story. This one's from The Guardian. The conflict in Iran will hit UK harder than any other industrialized country, says the OECD. The Middle East conflict will damage the UK's economy more than that of any other industrialized nation, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which warned of rising inflation in the first major assessment by a leading international think tank of the consequences of the conflict in Iran. The OECD said the UK economy would grow by just 0.7% this year, compared with its last forecast made in December of 1.2%. I mean, there's a whole load of issues here. And the iPaper on its front page, we normally skip the front pages, but this is relevant. UK faces triple shock of inflation, weak growth, and energy crunch. Linda, what do you reckon? Let's hope we're wrong. But what do you think? I as the song says, I think there could be trouble ahead.
Well, I think that we are in a weaker economic position than many countries in Europe. So if you haven't got that initial resilience, obviously, an exogenous shock like this is going to hit us very hard. Now, I think that ultimately we're going to be hit by a very, very bad energy crisis by the end of this year. At the moment, no one's feeling the pain because of the energy cap, but that can't last for long. And at that point, we're going to be in a very, very poor situation. And that's mainly because we haven't actually built up any economic momentum. Our growth in this country is very, very poor. So it's a bit like, having a tiny plant. You can't make the plant survive the frost if it hasn't grown to a certain level. And the fact of the matter is, in this country, we haven't grown fast enough or further enough.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And if you look at our levels of growth, they are anemic. The economy is effectively flatlining. And if you take account of the number of people that we've still got coming into the country, the economy is having to grow by about 1% a year just for Britain to stand still. And if you work it out per person, per capita, there's actually some evidence that per person, we're actually going backwards, that we could be in a recession already. Per person, and I think there's going to be a further squeeze on living standards, Linda.
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely bound to happen. But let me say that I think the situation is very poor in this country, and that there will be an argument for at least some controlled immigration. There is an argument to say that is a good idea.
I agree.
What we've got, though, is we are not spending enough on defence. And obviously, the NHS is very, very compromised. And we will be heading into the very poor winter climate for the NHS in figurative terms, but by the autumn. Now, we need to absolutely get on top of the benefit system, because that is a problem. We've got a huge, huge benefit situation. I'm not saying that people with very serious conditions or people who really need the support shouldn't get it. I don't believe that at all. But we are spending too much, too rapidly on our benefit system when we have to actually get defence spending to 2.5 or even 3% of gross domestic product, which may not even be the best measure of all, but we have to make sure that we try and do that. We're living in very, very perilous times. And woe betide the country that doesn't put the defence of its realm at the top of its agenda. That's what surely has to happen here.
Yes, I think so. The government had a choice recently, defence or welfare. I mean, they chose welfare, didn't they? And Linda, we have to get back to face-to-face assessments, don't we, for welfare benefits? Yeah, I mean, during COVID, it's gone online and it's stayed online. I mean, I think we have to go back to face-to-face assessments, don't we?
I think that's true. People worry that that's time-consuming, complicated and expensive, but I think there may be no way around that. But I do think that we have to pay attention to our defence spending. And we're looking at pictures now of migrants. And uncontrolled migration of this sort is a really big problem. It's a problem for the numbers, and it's also a problem for people, because when you see this happening in your country, it leads to a lot of ill feeling in our country. It leads to a lot of ill feeling. It leads to a lot of discontent and eventually a lot of upheaval. So those problems with uncontrolled immigration are certainly a big factor, but we need to get on top of defence spending. And let me just go back to what you were originally saying about, are we back in Europe or not? I think that there's no way we're going to go back into Europe. I just don't believe anyone, even Keir Starmer, thinks that it's a good idea. But he does want to get closer to Europe. And the reason why he may want to get closer to Europe is partly to do with defence, because we are much safer as being part of an entity than out on our own. That's for sure. So we have to think about that. If you think back to Mark Carney's speech at Davos earlier in this year, it was a landmark speech. It was a clever speech. What he is saying is there's nothing wrong with being a middle-ranking power. You know, we do not have an empire anymore, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't be very effective and very safe if we are co-joined to a bigger unit. I believe that's what he was saying. And that's what we have to do with our military. And goodness knows we have to do more than we've seen lately in terms of our spending, just our spending, but also, you know, when you have the Defense Secretary on air, on a radio channel, saying he doesn't know how many vessels we have in the Royal Navy, you have to say that at the moment we've taken our eye off the ball.
Yeah, we do. John Healy there on LBC with Nick Ferrari asked, how many warships has the Navy got? Hang on a minute. Bit of a Diane Abbott sort of situation. And he gave the wrong gave the wrong answer.
Yeah,
he was asked how many. He was asked how many. He was asked specifically how many frigates have we got. He said 17. No, we've got 7, not 17. But Linda, it's interesting you mentioned Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, and you know, working with others. I mean, of course, we're still in NATO, of course. I mean, as an example. I mean, I'm a big proponent of CANZUK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK. I mean, that's another good example, and I think it would be actually a useful alternative to getting dragged back into the orbit of Brussels. I mean, we want to trade and cooperate with Brussels, Linda, don't we? But you know, the problem has always been political union, and we were never comfortable members, were we?
No, but I think you made a good point when you said at least we were members and there was some power in being a member. I think the problem with getting much closer to Brussels and not being a member means that you've got all of the disadvantages and none of the advantages. But I think in a military sense, we should be much closer to Europe. And also, I've had personal experience of talking to small business owners who have really suffered as a result of us leaving the EU. So we have to do something about those people. We have to help SMEs in this country because they did suffer. I was talking to a guy who runs a shellfish company down in Cornwall, and it's been catastrophic for him. Yeah. So we do need to think about this very seriously. But at the end of the day, we had a referendum. It should have been a super referendum, and it wasn't. That would have been much more conclusive, obviously, but we had a referendum. We decided to leave. We have to work out how to make it work.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Linda. Okay. Good stuff. All right. So here on Unprecedented TV, we have other shows and other treats for you, not just Tim Scott Uncancelled. So we'll now hear about some of the other shows that are available here on Unprecedented TV. Okay, thank you. That's Claire Dyer with Dire Consequences here on Unprecedented TV. And you can find us on YouTube. Go to the search box, type in Unprecedented TV, and you can find us. All right, and that's a great way to follow us and keep in touch. Okay, let's go on to our next story, which is one that our guest Linda Duberley has already sort of picked up on. This is from The Sun. Watch your own phone time, parents told. Warning that kids will copy screen habits. Now, Linda, we're both parents, and one of the terrifying things about being a parent is the extent to which your children will copy what you do. I suppose this is what they're driving at here. And, you know, if parents are effing and blinding around the house, you know, it won't be long before the children are. But I mean, that is one of the scary things about being a parent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's not just that children will copy what parents do, or they undeniably do from the get-go. It's just that parents who are continually on the phone can't actually see the problem anyway, because it's become so ingrained in their lives. They don't see what the issue is for a much younger person. Now, it's hard. I know this because I've actually got I've got 3 great nephews and 1 great niece. And obviously they're very young. But we all pitch in at family events. And I do things like colouring in or reading or things like that. And they love doing it.
Yes.
But you've got to, but it's harder. It's harder to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that they don't watch YouTube videos, but they're always supervised, and sometimes there's a real benefit from some of those YouTube videos.
Yes.
You need to be really, really vigilant with your child, and that is very difficult to do if you are constantly on your phone. Now, where I used to live in East Sheen, that's SW14, so it's a crowded traffic area. There was a notorious level crossing. This is just one anecdote. And I would continually see mothers with pushchairs pushing their child across the level crossing whilst tweeting or messaging or WhatsApping on the phone as they were pushing the pushchair. Now, I think parents have to be vigilant about their phone use too, because as you say, young children will copy them, but also they will lose the plot about what's important to life. Sometimes, why don't you just pick up a book, go for a walk, join an exercise class, do something like that. Get your child out in the open air, get them down to the local recreation ground, get them out walking. Those things are really important. And I'm talking from personal experience here. Where I had a child that became engrossed in one particular video game for hour after hour after hour until I just thought he was being quiet in his bedroom. And then I realized, by the time I realized there was a problem, we had to get proper professional help. And we had to make a really big effort. Now, I know I was on a program called ITV called Tonight with Trevor McDonald. So I flew to Chicago to watch kids who were doing degree level computer game designing. So there's an upside to this, and they were very clever. They were educated in medieval history, in architecture, in design, and it's great. And some of those games are testing and valuable. It's not that they're not. You don't want to chuck the baby out with the bathwater, but you cannot leave a little child online for hour after hour after hour and expect there to be no consequences, because there will be.
Yeah, indeed. And I think something else that I've seen recently, and I wonder to what extent this might be linked, Linda, is feedback from primary schools that 4- and 5-year-old children are starting in reception really unready for school. They can't sit still. Some of them are still in nappies at 4.
Oh, absolutely. And I spoke to a headmistress of a very well-known school I won't name. It's a secondary school. It's a private school. So that says there's no idea that any of these children come from very challenging or compromised backgrounds. And she said to me, the problem is some of them aren't toilet trained when they get to school. And another problem is they can't eat. They can't use cutlery. They can only eat using their hands. And they do all sorts of things that won't help. Now, we've seen, and this is only my observation, and I don't know the science behind this. So, maybe you can contact us and let us know. But we've seen a huge rise in the diagnosis of attention deficit disorder. And we have not, as far as I know, specifically tied that to the use of devices. And yet I think there could be a link between the two.
I wonder if there might be.
Yeah, because I mean, and in terms of it being a habit.
We just spoke about children reading and trying to swipe the page. Like it's like
and then we think, why did we close all the libraries down? What was wrong with going to the library? And I know that borrowing books seems to be old-fashioned, but it wasn't just about borrowing a book. And why borrow a book when you can get the electronic version? It was the environment of the library. You know, when I used to take my little kids when they were little to the library, and there would be people telling stories and little art exhibitions and groups and all sorts of things where you actually communicate with each other, where you actually talk to each other. I meet youngsters now that actually find it incredibly not just difficult to hold a conversation, but they get too anxious when they're asked to hold a conversation. And that's a big problem as well. You know, we can't just let good conversations die in terms of people using their overextended thumbs on a device. We have to keep those kind of things going, and they all require an effort. You can't just switch off and bail out of that situation, because we will have very, very deep and unpleasant repercussions across society generally.
No, I agree. We're starting to see, it comes back to the story that we started with Meta and others being sued in California. Okay, thanks, Linda. All right, so we come to our last story, and we always like to keep a light-hearted one, as I said at the top of the show. And what is your favorite TV advert? Now, this is from the Daily Mirror. It had to be you, drumming gorilla is the top commercial. The drumming gorilla playing the hammering away at the drums to that Phil Collins song. But Linda, I wonder if people can remember what the ad was actually for.
That's the problem. Can I just tell you a little story? I'll do it really quickly. There's a really, really good advert for mince pies one Christmas many years ago.
Yeah.
And I think Selena Scott actually did the voiceover. And it was so delicious. It was the mince pie with the cream cheese and the Grand Marnier. And I watched this whole recipe put out on television. And then I raced down to Waitrose. And I was jumping up and down. Where are these but ingredients? But I've watched this recipe. I need to get these ingredients. I've watched this recipe for your supermarket on television. And he said, "Madam, it's down the road at Sainsbury's."
Oh, no.
Oh, it's so embarrassing, really. But I think there's a balance. You see, the advert has to be about a story well told, which tangentially advertises the product or the service or whatever. But sometimes you can go a little bit too far where people don't really get what the advert is selling, so to speak. But, yes, you know, I'm an old school, a veteran of watching adverts, and I still remember the Nescafe adverts. Yeah. With, do you remember with, I think it was, I think Linda Jackson was the star of them, with a famous American actor. That's my favorite advert.
There was the Nescafe Gold Blend advert. We're going back a few years now. And there was a Nescafe Gold Blend couple that they were always meeting over a cup of coffee.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I love all that stuff. But you don't see it so much anymore, because I don't think television advertising is the way it used to be. You know,
I know what you mean.
We've moved into the digital age. I remember going to they were called the advertising Oscars at the Albert Hall.
Oh, yes.
Where I was there watching them present the awards, because it was such a creative endeavor, and it was really interesting to watch the adverts. But I think, you know, that was the rock and roll moment for television advertising. I don't think it's quite the same anymore, because people are watching stuff on their laptops, they're watching streaming, they're going to different platforms. So I don't think that level of creativity is there anymore. But I do quite like the gorilla and the drums.
Yes. So that was for Cadbury's chocolate, by the way.
See, I didn't remember that.
Probably made in Poland now, since they got bought. And number 2 is the bald guy smoking his Hamlet, and he's in the phone booth, sorry, the photo booth, and he keeps slipping, and his comb over keeps.
Oh yes.
Number 3 was that really good Guinness advert with the surfers and the horses. But for the Smash advert with the robots, I can't believe that didn't make one of the most popular ones. We always, those of us of a certain vintage will remember from for MASH Get Smashed.
Yes.
And it's the robots looking down on Earth,
and
seeing us peeling our potatoes and smashing up the Oh, there's the
Oh,
Nescafe Gold Blend.
that in fact is Sharon Morn.
Ah,
That's the actress
yes,
married to Trevor Eve. Do you remember?
yes, yes,
Beautiful long curly
yeah,
hair.
yeah. The
Yeah, I remember all that.
Nescafe Gold Blend couple.
Yeah.
Another great, I'll tell you an ad with a great slogan. It was a really simple ad, probably was really cheap to make because it was just a woman in her sitting room with a vacuum cleaner. You might know where I'm going with this one. But the slogan just summed it all up. Shake and vac and put the freshness back.
Yeah.
I mean, so simple because it's got
Yeah,
the
yeah.
name of the, we all remember that.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Cadbury's chocolate one, we remember the drummer and the gorilla. But shake and vac and put the freshness back. It's got the name of the product in it, and it
Yeah.
does exactly the Ron Seal test. That's another one. And put the freshness back. It says it says what it does.
Yeah, there was a very, very funny one that not so long ago, I think it was Lidl, where they had a very elderly couple sitting on a sofa and it was all about tea. And the husband was saying, well, I like this brew and I like that brew and I like this one. And his wife just said something like, me, I just like a gin and tonic.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I don't know if I've got that exactly right, but it was a brilliant advert because it was one of those kind of sight gags and she sounded funny and it was entertaining, but also you did remember, I hope I've remembered the correct supermarket this time round.
Yes. Was it just a general ad for Lidl?
Yeah, they did a whole series of them, but that
Yes.
was the funniest one. But they were all to a certain template. So you used to watch out for them because they were all different. And I think that's a good thing. They were all different, but they were consistent.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Linda. We're drawing towards the end of the show. Linda Duberley, thank you so much for joining us. Just remind people of where they can find you on X and elsewhere.
Okay, at Linda Duberley on X. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Also broadcast on GB News, Talk TV, Mike Graham Show, occasionally the BBC. So tune in. Always happy to voice my opinion, but always happy to listen to feedback.
Thank you, Linda. You've had a great broadcasting career, and here's Shake and Vac TV adverts. Great to have Linda. Very experienced broadcasting career, Linda. Lovely to have you on the show again, folks. That's the end of this episode of Tim Scott Uncancelled. Thanks for watching us here on Unprecedented TV.